Greetings and welcome to today's educational program, ISO 50001 Ready Recognition for your organization. This is Fred Calici with ASQ Energy and Environmental Division, joining the program today from Toronto, Canada. Today's program is being recorded. Any views expressed in this webinar are for the general educational purposes only and do not represent any official views or positions of the sponsoring or the presenter's organization. A video recording link of today's program will be available online after the webinar via the ASQ Energy and Environmental Division website. We're looking forward to your great comments and questions during the program. We invite you to turn off your cell phone, close the door, and give us your great input. When you have a comment or question, please type them in the chat box. Today we have the pleasure of hearing from Mark Stover. Mark is a Program Operations Manager for Focus on Energy. He works primarily with large industrial companies in Wisconsin. Specifically, he helps companies adopt practices of strategic energy management, including coaching their energy team leaders towards achievement of ISO 50001 Ready Recognition from the U.S. Department of Energy. Focus on Energy has supported 5 companies to become recognized, and 4 more are in the process. Mark will talk about how organizations can use free tools from the Department of Energy to get started in better managing the organization's significant energy resources in a strategic and sustainable way. And so, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Mark Stover. Mark, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Fred. Appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all today, and thank you for joining the webinar. As Fred said, 50001 Ready is a free program of the Department of Energy, and I thought what we would do today is go through not only a little bit about energy management, but also how the tools of the 50001 Ready suite of offerings that the DOE provides, how those all work. So let's start with some basic operational definitions around energy management. Just want to make sure everybody's on the same page. As quality professionals, we know it's important to make sure that operational definitions are in place and that we're not talking past each other. So what does it mean to manage energy, really? I think that this is actually a process that companies go through from a very basic kind of orientation all the way through really a process orientation. So typically, many companies, even large energy users, don't pay much attention to their utility bills or don't pay much attention to their energy use because it's seen as a fixed cost. It's seen as something that they really can't change or have much impact on. And that's not a bad thing. That's just the way that it is for many companies. But at some point, companies will begin to start to look, especially those larger energy users, will begin to start to look at their spend and whether or not they're maintaining some kind of control. So a typical place to start is comparing the bills from month to month. The weakness with that, though, is that the energy charges can vary for a variety of reasons. It can vary because there's changes in productivity, changes in product mix. Customers can require new components to the quality output, so that requires additional processing. And companies can also hit peak energy use during a month, which can throw off their comparisons. So it's a good start, but it's probably not enough. And so that's when companies start to then think about, well, maybe we can take advantage of some opportunities to improve our equipment itself. Maybe we should have a budget for those annual kind of improvements. And that sort of budgeting process begins to move energy management into the management of other kinds of resources for the company. They're managing finance, now they're managing some resources for energy spend. Beyond that, the companies will often start to set goals because budget is now important. They'll set a goal for energy cost per unit of output, or maybe a goal that they've set. The DOE's Better Buildings Initiative recommends a 2.5% year-over-year kind of goal as a starting point. So an energy engineer or maybe a facilities engineer that's already working in the company may do some guidance for the company in terms of getting them towards their goals. So we're moving more now towards a process orientation and away from just a project-by-project orientation when a company starts to think about actually creating an energy management system. This would be parallel to a quality management system or an environmental management system. This is where continuous improvement really starts to be built in. And a company that receives outside recognition for the effectiveness of their ENMS is a company that's probably in the very tippy top of the level of companies that are doing energy management systems. So we talk about an energy management system. What do we mean? I mentioned that the standard, the 2018 standard now exists for 50001. That's part of the high-level structure that ISO has put together. So you'll find, and we'll talk about this as I go along, that the energy management system corresponds pretty nicely with the quality management system and the environmental management system, the 9001 and 14001 standards in that high-level structure. So the 50001 2018 standard says that an energy management system should include an energy policy, objectives and targets, action plans, and it should focus on processes that are necessary to be focused on for improvement in order to achieve those objectives and targets. So if we break this down just a little bit further, let's talk about those key elements of the energy management system. When you put a policy in place, typically a policy is something that senior management or even top management of an organization is responsible for because it's all-encompassing. It covers the entire organization. And an energy policy will express the intentions that top management has with respect to its energy resource. When we're talking with our companies, we like to help them to understand how important that is. They would have a policy for managing human resources. They would have a policy for managing financial resources. They would have a policy for managing material resources. So energy resources are just another one of those kinds of inputs to their customer satisfaction process that they want to govern, that they want to manage. And so as top management starts to take a look at these things, whenever they become involved, it becomes a strategic issue. The energy targets actually have become quantifiable as we set objectives for those targets. And as quality professionals, we know that we should be focusing on processes in order to ensure that we are actually going to affect performance improvement. Focus on those energy-related processes that will affect our objectives and will help us to achieve the targets. And finally, a key element of the energy management system is to create action plans. And it's third on the list here, but I want to call it out as particularly important because action plans help to engage employees. It helps to engage other people beyond just those who are involved in the day-to-day management of energy, a facilities engineer or an energy engineer. Action plans help to make sure that people are engaging with the energy policy at the level where they're working. One of the things that we've found in a couple of the companies that I'm working at is that an energy policy can be put forth by senior management, but if the operator on the line is continuing to run the line faster and having to turn on a little bit more energy or run that furnace just a little bit hotter because they think it'll make the outcome of the product a little bit better, the energy policy falls apart because the operator has ultimate control on whether or not the policy is going to actually go into effect. So helping companies to achieve their energy targets and objectives is really important to involve employees. Just as another example, one of the companies that I'm working with has huddle boards around the plant where they confer with employees on a daily basis. They talk about safety, quality, delivery, cost, and they also talk in this particular company about their environmental and energy concerns. So that's a key way, using one of those kind of huddle boards or sounding boards on the plant floor to be able to help companies and help the employees of the company actually align with the policy. So let's talk a little bit more about the policy. An energy policy, a good energy policy, will provide a framework for setting and reviewing those objectives and targets. And when you think about it, a framework is just another word for plan. Setting and reviewing is just another set of words for doing and checking. So we've already got the elements of a plan, do, check, adjust structure that we're also familiar with in terms of our energy management process too and our energy policy. a good energy policy should also include management commitment. And so management needs to commit to a couple of things. One is they need to commit to being able to provide both resources and information to middle management, to the energy engineers, and to the employees as a whole, in order to make sure that objectives and targets can be reached. It's no good setting a policy, but not giving people any resources in order to achieve the goals that the policy promulgates. And finally, included in the management commitment, based on the standard, is a commitment to continual improvement, both of the energy management system itself, as well as energy performance. So the standard asks that, or requires that, companies comply to both of those, that the energy management system has a system of improvement built in, and that there is actual energy performance improvement over time. So as a kind of a last point here of my preamble, to help you understand how the energy management system or an energy management system fits with what many of us are very familiar with the plan, do, check, adjust cycle. This is the high-level standard, or the high-level structure that these standards are related to. Context of the organization surrounding, and the various elements of the standard itself, then as elements of this high-level structure. So leadership in the center, setting the policy, planning done, plan, do, check, adjust around the outside here as we actually do the work in support and operation, check the performance, and improve. So if you look at those elements, then leadership does establish that policy. The policy provides the framework or plan. The organization executes the plan. We have required by the standard and by the 50001 Ready process to review performance and then commit to that continuous improvement like we've talked about. So that sets the structure of what you're going to see here as we explore the Navigator itself. Let's take a look at a little bit more here. If you are, I'll go into detail a little bit more with the Navigator. So if you're going to put an energy management system in place, but you've never done one before, the 50001 Ready system is a good place to start. So what is this 50001 Ready thing we're talking about? Well, first of all, it's a free online tool, and it's one of those things that really can't be beat because it's accessible, it's free, it allows you to do a gap analysis of your current condition against what the standard would require, and then puts in place or offers tools and resources to help you close that gap. It'll help you to compare your current system to the requirements of the standard, and ultimately you end up receiving public recognition in this area here. There, you can see there's a link, and I'll get into this actually, so we'll play around with it a little bit more as we go forward, but the 50001 Ready recognized facilities are actually listed on the website, and a little story is told. They call it a showcase that tells the story of what the company has done. In fact, a wide variety of companies get recognized. We've got in Wisconsin here, paper mills play a big role for us, steel mills as well. But you can see that school districts and Air Force Base, national labs, even something, Realty Trust is out there that has received recognition for having an energy management system. I would call out the fact that GM has 22 sites that have received 50001 Ready recognition. And the reason I call that out is that while right now 50001 is not a standard that a lot of companies are familiar with, or that a lot of companies are even being held accountable to, I liken it back to when we were first starting 25 years ago with the 9001 standard. And lots of companies didn't see a benefit in doing that either until the supply chain started to demand that that 9001 certification was required. We didn't have a 9001 Ready recognition back in those days. And so the supply chain becomes a very important force for moving this kind of understanding about the energy management resource as a standard forward into different companies' actual strategies. So when I see that GM's got 22 sites that are 50001 Ready recognized, my conclusion is that they're getting ready to tell their supply base, hey, we can do it, you can too. And maybe the first step is 50,001 ready. Maybe they're going to go all the way to the certification. But I think that's another reason why you're probably interested in this conversation today, because it is something that is coming on the horizon. So we're going to jump into the Navigator itself here in just a second. What I'm going to do in the next few minutes with you is take a look at some basic navigation, help you figure out how this thing works. We'll talk about all those resources and tools that are out there and how to access them. The DOE and the Lawrence Berkeley Lab, which has been instrumental in helping get this thing set up, have made it very easy to get to those resources and tools. There's some unique aspects to an energy management system that differ from a quality management system or an environmental management system, so I want to call those out as well. And one of the things that the Navigator has done, it was originally started based on the 2011 standard, but with the 2018 standard coming out last August, just recently they've been able to update the website so that you can see more, an updated 2018 standard version as well. And in fact, that's the one I'll be showing you. So let's go to the Navigator here. You should be seeing on the screen now a project's overview page. Actually, when you log on to, I'll go over here for just a second. This is that page that I had an image of in the slideshow just a minute ago. Here's those recognized facilities right here. I gave you a summary of that already. There's a number of different support pieces here, tools, expertise, and training. What does 50,001 mean? All of this stuff is available on the website. When you click here to go into the 50,001 Ready Navigator, you go to a log-on page, and after you go to the log-on page, you'll come up with a project's overview page. So I just saved us a little bit of time, and hopefully my fat finger is not messing up my password so we can get in. So let's look at navigation here as to how you can work into this project. I put a project out there for demonstration purposes. There really isn't anything much behind this, but I put it out there for our customers so that they could see how this thing works. So we can go into, there's 25 tasks, and you can see them here in the next to the overall task progress icon. We're 8% of the way through here on our project. You can link into any one of the individual tasks going from here, or you can go to the project as a whole by linking here. So I'm going to go into the project because I wanted to show you something in terms of the 2018 structure. There are 7 buckets here, 7 circles that show you what the how the Navigator is organized in the 2018 standard. And if you're familiar with any of the standards in the high-level structural, you'll notice that these labels here probably look familiar. Context of the organization is Section 4, leadership is Section 5, planning is Section 6, and so on, all the way out to Section 10 for improvement. This is that high-level structure that I showed you just a few minutes ago. So they've organized the DOE, that is, and LBL have organized the Navigator into that structure to make it a convenient way to take a look at things. So what you see when you're first navigating into this is your dashboard, and down below in the first section, because by default we're in the context of the organization section, the 3 tasks that are there. Getting started, so let's go through this all. Getting started just brings up an overview sheet that tells you a little bit about how things work. So even if you didn't have the opportunity to listen to this webinar, you can still go through the process by logging in or going out there yourself, setting up an account, and you'll see all kinds of resources that support you. The status report brings up a PDF that just tells you what your current status is. Managing the project takes you to a page where you can actually update, what's the project name, what company, where's your gas and electric coming from, if you're connected to any other program that's out there. So this is a way to manage and update that. And then managing the team is one of the elements of the project management structure that's built into the Navigator. You can actually start to identify, these are a couple of people that work me and one of the other guys that works here. You can actually identify roles for these people, and by putting their emails into the system, you can actually use the navigator itself to send emails to people and let them know that they've got a task awaiting them. We'll show you how that works in just a couple of minutes. So let's jump into one of these just to show you what a particular task looks like. So I should say, by the way, that while the tasks are numbered in order here, and there is a structure to them, there's nothing that requires you to do the tasks in the numerical order. You may very well want to take a look at some of these tasks and identify, for instance, task 4 is management commitment. That might be the one you want to start with first, or task 5 has to do with creating the energy policy, which is also an important thing to do. So you can jump around in the tasks and do things as you wish, whatever makes the most sense for you. So let's start with the energy policy here. I'll just walk you through what this one task looks like. They're all very similar. By the way, the color coding up here on top is to show you at a glance that something that's clear is not yet started, something that's colored in blue is in progress, something that's this sort of tannish color is ready for review. If you're using this as a project management tool, you may want to have senior management or somebody in the who's overseeing the energy system take a look at things. And ones that are colored in this darker color are completed. That relates down here to this element or this element of the task approach here, whether it's not started, in progress, ready for review, or completed. So for each task, you get a definition. We have an energy policy statement, which has been approved, and you get a summary of what needs to be done in order to accomplish this task. There's a little bit more detail in terms of the task overview. It starts to give you sort of an overall framework and perspective, and it gives you reference to the relevant sections of in this case, the 2018 standard. You can also get a full description, and it's broken out in terms of these links. How to draft an energy policy, for instance, how to get the policy approved. And one of the things I like about every one of these tasks is that for those of you that may have either a 9001 or a 14001 system in place, there's transition tips available. So in this case, for talking about the energy policy, it says here that an energy policy for energy management is similar to what you've been doing already for your quality or environmental system. So all of those things are actually available. You can download this entire document then, all of this as a PDF, and some companies will like to do that and use that as a reference point. I'll show you a little bit more about that in just a second. There's a note section for each task, and for each task you can create notes that, for instance, say energy policy needs approval, and then you can save that. And then as you go back, you'll see that now we have a note in there. And so if anybody else is working on this project with you, they can see that that's the current status, or that's a note that is of importance. One of my customers is using this as a way to help him remember what needs to be done in each of these tasks, how far the gap is that's yet to be closed, those kinds of things. You can also send these notes in assignments. So you can add a new team member. You can add a new team member as either an approver or a contributor, and you can actually send from the navigator emails to somebody to let them know that something is ready for them to be taking a look at. So senior management might be seeing that they've got something ready to review. For each of these tasks, there's also a list of resources. So in the 2018 standard, the task resource always takes you to this playbook, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to download these things. They've done a really good job at making sure this uploads quickly. So I've got a resource coming up here, another one here hidden behind. So for the energy policy, you'll notice that these items, the navigator is completed when you do these 3 items. Those are the same items that you will see here in the getting it done. So you have to draft your energy policy statement, have top management improve it, and incorporate that energy policy into your energy management standard. So when you look at the playbook, it gives you those 3 things that need to be done, and then shows you some things that you might want to consider doing in terms of how to get that energy policy statement drafted. there's a checklist there, things to do to enter information about how you're doing. This then becomes a record that may be auditable if you're actually a 50001 2018 company. But these things create a record of how well you've done and how far along you've gotten. So incorporating that energy policy into your ENMS awareness system, how did you do it? When was it incorporated? When was management approval? You've got the records all right here. One of the reasons that I brought up, I'm just going to flip over, whoops, there's the chain bridge in Budapest. One of the reasons that I brought up this one, this is a task for management commitment. It says that some of the things you should be doing include maybe having a briefing for top management, and down just a little bit farther it says, why don't you create an elevator speech for your, in order for management to be able to communicate what it is that's important. If you are concerned about creating an elevator speech, we go back over here to the Navigator itself, you can actually go into those resources. Let's do that. Here's the resource index, and it defaults to what I'm in is the 2018 standard, so it shows all of the playbook tasks there. But you can also go into the resource archive. And if you're looking for the resource that would talk about how I create an elevator speech, you just search for it over here. And as I type it in, there it comes up. There's the elevator speech worksheet. I can download that quickly and take a look at what do they recommend in terms of setting up an elevator speech. So here's a number of things to think about as you put together a 12-second speech. So it's just that fast and just that easy to be able to get resources available to you that you will want to have in order to work your way through the Navigator tasks. I wanted to show you, so that's the tasks, that's the info within a task. I wanted to show you a little bit more about the resources and tools. These resources here are part of an archive from the 2011 standard, and all of these things are, pull them all up here. You can see that there's a variety of different kinds of things in here. There's PDF files, there's Word documents, there's links to other sites, there's PowerPoint presentations. So there's a wide variety of resources in here that even if you didn't set yourself up to be somebody working on recognition, you can still log in. You can still go out here and take a look, and maybe some of this stuff would be useful in your energy management system. The Navigator drop-down menus or drop-down slots over here on the right also give you some perspective on terms of the tasks that are out here. This is set up again as the 2018 standard tasks, but I can switch over to see how did they move the 2011 tasks into the 2018 tasks. There's still 25 tasks. Doesn't matter whether you're using the 2011 standard or the 2018 standard within the Navigator. There's still 25 tasks, but there are a few new ones on the 2018 side, like setting the context of your energy management system is one. Risk management is a key part of the new high-level structure for all of the ISO standards, so that's new. Task 7 is new. And there's also the task of continual improvement, which did not exist in the 2011 version of the Navigator. So you can see a little bit about how they've managed to move the 2011 tasks into the 2018 versions. You can see that some of them merged, some of them are a direct transfer. I have several companies that are working on the 2011 standard because before that was available, before the 2018 standard update was available on the Navigator, they had already started in 2011. And so I'm recommending that they just stay with that. That's fine. For new companies, somebody that's just starting out, you may as well start off with the 2018 tasks and the 2018 structure. So that's why I'm showing you the 2018 structure here in this webinar. The other thing to consider here is when you get recognition in that first year and then get subsequent recognition in every previous year. After you've received recognition, even if it was under the 2011 standard, in the second year when you re-seek recognition, you'll automatically be bumped up or moved into the 2018 tasks, or the 2018 standard version of the Navigator. So they're going to slowly phase out the 2011 standard version. By the end of this year, it probably won't even be up on the website anymore. A couple of other things to show you in terms of resources that exist within the DOE site. The companies that work with us, we provide them with a regression analysis that helps them to measure and manage their energy management system. It takes into consideration things like weather and production and days of the week when production may be high or low, other variables that are important in terms of looking at, call them relevant variables. They're important in terms of looking at the energy management. But if you don't have that resource available to you, there is something that the DOE provides that's called the Energy Performance Indicator Calculator. And I'll just click over to that real quickly here. It comes up nicely and easily. And basically, I'm not going to go into it here, but basically what you do is you take the variables that you think are important. That might be weather, production, and days of the week or holidays, for instance. That might be ones that show a relevant difference in terms of your energy usage. You can use the DOE Energy Footprint tool, and you can download it here, to input that data, and then the output of that data gets pasted here. You load the data up, and you'll get 5 or 6 regression models that from the ENPI Light Performance Indicator model here. You'll get 5 or 6 regression models that you can then choose to use as your particular approach to how you're managing your energy. So that's another resource that exists here. So all of these things are available free, as I've said, something that you can work your way through. I'm just going to go back to the to my projects, link into one of them here, just to leave it there for just a second. What I'm going to wrap up here with, I'll spend a few more minutes just talking about our experience with the Navigator, and then we can open this up for questions as we go along here. Just want to make sure that we've got some more of the experience that we provided, or that we've experienced here in Wisconsin, available to you as well. So let me go back to the presentation. So what is the process of achieving 50001 Ready Recognition? It's just 3 basic steps, really. The first step is to complete those 25 tasks in the Navigator. And so checking completed, as you saw that we could do, will signal that the task work is done. Again, that may not be necessary if you're not using the Navigator as a project management tool, but it's a nice way to make sure that people who are on your energy management team see what's been done. So once you've completed the 25 tasks, you check them all off. You self-attest to the completion of all the tasks. So I'm going to show you here what the self-attestation form looks like. It's right here. That's not it. Here it is. The self-attestation form is really very simple. This is not a certification. The 50001 Ready Recognition from the DOE is not a certification. It's a management attestation. So what management needs to do is fill out this very simple 2-page form. What's the project? Where are we located? What's the scope of our project here? So for one of my companies, it's all the buildings that are located at a particular address. For another of my companies, they've taken a picture of the campus, and it's the buildings that are located on that campus. What's the organization name? And who's the top management? So you just sign this and submit this as part of your package. You can upload it right online, right on the Navigator. Save this as a PDF, upload it. And that self-attestation form will go in with, let's go back to the presentation here. That will go back to the DOE. You'll submit that along with your energy usage. So in the first year of doing your recognition, you actually don't even have to show that you've created an energy performance there, that you've saved energy. What you're doing in that first year is basically setting that baseline for yourself. So the DOE is particularly interested in different fuel types, whether it's gas or diesel, or natural gas rather, or diesel, or electricity, or hydro, whatever it might be that your energy usage is, what your fuel types are. They're interested in seeing how companies are managing that. So you need to provide them with your energy consumption data in the first year, and in the second and subsequent years, you provide them with the energy performance improvements over time. Now, the DOE is also understanding enough to recognize that things are tough in the real world. Things are tough in production, and you may not actually be able to show energy improvement in that second year. Maybe there was some additional add-ons to your company, or you brought in some new robots, or you added some production lines, and that actually ended up consuming more energy than in your baseline period. It's okay in the second year not to show an energy improvement, but by the third year, they're really looking for you to have settled down and make sure that the energy performance is there. So even easier then, the advantage in that first year is you don't have to show actual improvement, but you do have to show what your energy consumption has actually been, so the DOE can track it. So why would you want to use this 50001 Ready tool? Well, I've got 7 reasons why you want to use it. As we talked about, it's free, it's easy to access, it's online, so people can access it from multiple locations if you've got a company that is in multiple states or multiple locations within a state. There's no penalty for starting the process and not finishing it. If you set yourself up a project out there, but it turns out that management's commitment wavered, or maybe the company was sold, or there's a number of things that have happened, and you decided not to complete it, no problem, just drop out. The online tools and supporting documents that I gave you a brief overview on are useful even if you're not pursuing certification, or rather recognition. I strongly encourage you just to go out and explore the Navigator on your own to see what kinds of things are available to you. My experience with the DOE and Lawrence Berkeley Lab LBL staff has been that they provide free support and answer questions readily. Whenever I've asked questions, I've usually gotten an answer that same day, which is simply remarkable. Maybe part of it is that Lawrence Berkeley is on the West Coast, so me being in the Midwest, that gives them a couple of extra hours to answer questions. But I've always received very good feedback from them. Here's one that's critical for management, and that is that proprietary company information there's no way to do it. You can't upload proprietary information into the Navigator. Now, the EMTI Lite tool that I showed you, that's different, but presumably you're using that because you want the outcome of the regression analysis. But even there, the Department of Energy is not interested in tracking your energy consumption or your production on a daily basis, so company information can remain confidential, and that's comforting, I think, to senior management often. As I mentioned, you don't have to demonstrate energy savings in the first year, and maybe the best reason to do this is to get that public recognition for the work you've done on your ENMS. So what are some of the lessons we've learned here in Wisconsin, and what would I recommend as next steps? And I've got even a small sample of an energy policy here to share with you as well. Some of the lessons that we've learned include making sure that you're involving all levels of management early and often. Senior management's required to commit, but mid-level management is where things in the communication chain either break down or continue. So mid-level management needs to be involved in this. Supervisors, team leaders, all of those people will make a difference in terms of the employee engagement. So make sure everybody's involved. It's important also to make sure that you've got an energy team. Now, most companies that are at a level 4 or level 5, like I showed you early in the presentation, probably already have an energy team in place. But one of the things that's important to consider there is that the energy team should be cross-functional and representative of different shifts and different locations if that's important. You should definitely not reinvent the wheel. You can piggyback on the 14,001 or even the 9,001 standard that you've got in the 50,001 recognition process, and I showed you where you could find in each of the tasks a way to link to some ideas about how to make that happen. So it's definitely set up to be able to build on what you already have. And we've talked a little bit about engaging employees. Maybe I've talked too much about it, I don't know. I think it's really important because making sure that everybody's engaged in this and making sure that that energy policy is actually going to be in force across the organization you can't do it without engaging employees. And that last bullet point there at the very bottom, establishing a two-way communication system is particularly important. Very often we're consumed with how we're communicating out to employees, and we're providing them with message boards or performance boards. We're providing them with information on video screens across the plant, all those kinds of things. But we want to make sure that we're also hearing from the employees too, because I've seen in a number of my companies that I'm working with, the employees coming up with really terrific ideas. And I'll give you just one example, which I thought was terrific. I have a plastics manufacturer here in Wisconsin, and like most plastics manufacturers, they're dealing with small bits of resin that are usually little balls or tiny little pieces that tend to float around across the floor. It gets to be a mess. And so this company was using the air, the compressed air that they had at their workstations at each of the thermoformers to clean up that little residue, the resin that had gotten onto the floor, sweeping it up and getting it out of the way so it doesn't create a safety hazard, people tripping or slipping on it. When they started to think about energy management, and we helped them to understand how expensive compressed air is as an energy consumer, one of the employees said, you know, gee, I clean the leaves off my driveway with a leaf blower I've got at home. Maybe I could bring that in and we could see how that works. And he did. He brought his leaf blower in, and they tried using that to clean up the resin on the floor, and it worked great. And it's battery operated, so there's no energy impact to the company at all. The company thought this was such a great idea, they bought 10 of them for people to use. And the guys actually enjoy cleanup now because they get to play with a toy that doesn't cost any energy impact to the company, but make sure that that safety metric is being met and that they're cleaning things up. So engaging employees, you'll find some terrific ideas. What other lessons have we learned here in Wisconsin? It's important to set a schedule cadence to stay on track with completing the tasks, because it's all too easy to fall off the wagon and have this thing go by the wayside. So setting that schedule, even just using a spreadsheet to do it, but project management's a good way too, or use the Navigator. I think, as I said before, starting with an energy policy is important, but you don't have to follow the tasks in numerical order. Do what makes sense for the company. And we've talked a little bit about these things: significant energy users, operational controls, these things that are different in the energy management system than you would find in quality management system or an environmental management system, especially looking at changing policies about procurement or energy consideration and design. Those may be things that bump into other parts of the company that management would be less than willing to see. If that's the case, that still doesn't keep you from receiving recognition. The point of the 50001 Ready Recognition program is to get you started. And maybe procurement isn't something that you want, procurement policies aren't something that you want to change in the first year of the program, but it might be something that becomes more important as the organization moves along. So one last slide here to share with you, some takeaway actions. Here's that energy policy that I mentioned a little bit earlier. I think you can create an energy policy that's relatively simple and focused. This does not have to be a huge document. In fact, if it's something simple like this, it can be printed on the back of people's ID cards that they carry to badge into the system. Something that looks at a commitment to managing energy use and continuous improvement, that uses data and looks at closing gaps from your in your performance. That's really all that's needed. You can go into a lot more detail if you want, and some companies do because they've already got environmental or quality policies and they piggyback the energy policy on that. But something just as simple as that would satisfy the requirements. I think it's also important that you set an energy objective that you can meet in the near term. So within the budget cycle, maybe the next 12 months or so. And take a lesson from the company I mentioned that is part of the Better Buildings Initiative. They're doing a 2.5% year-over-year energy consumption reduction. That could be a great way to start. Something that you can use to motivate people and help them to see what the score is. How are we doing against our objective? And then finally, I guess I've talked about this before, but I'm going to leave you with this last item. Find ways to involve other people in this, not just the engineers, not just even, in fact, the operators, but bring in finance, bring in the quality people. They'll have a lot to say about how you can build an energy management system. Bring in purchasing, help them to understand why the long-term cost of energy usage might be an important thing to consider as they're making purchasing decisions. So involving people even outside of what you might consider direct energy use is really critical to making sure that this becomes a sustainable process for you. So folks, with that, I will thank you very much for your time and attention. I appreciate the opportunity to share this information with you, and I will open it up for questions.
Okay, thank you, Mark. That was very informative and insightful. So yes, as Mark mentioned, it is now time for comments and questions. In case if you do have any comments, please type them in the Q&A box or the chat box, and Mark will be happy to answer any questions that you may have. So, any questions? Okay, so we have a question here. How is 50001 Ready different than DOE Energy Star Portfolio Manager?
Okay, so the Energy Star Portfolio Manager is a program that's designed to help companies to understand how their products or their equipment either is or isn't energy efficient. And the Energy Star program helps companies to make some decisions about how that equipment, how decisions can be made best to provide energy efficiency equipment for the facility. So the 50001 Ready process, or 50001 Ready program, is really process oriented. It's focused on how do we set up a system in place that will allow us to meet energy goals even outside of the equipment that we're using. So for instance, like that example I gave of bringing in leaf blowers, you're looking for opportunities to impact operational and maintenance types of improvements with a strategic or 50001 approach to energy management.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Any other questions?
Well, while we're waiting, Fred, for questions, one thing I would encourage people to do is to get out onto the 50001 Ready website. It's, as I said, it's free, it's easy to access. Go and take a look at what's there and explore it a little bit before you decide whether or not that's the right program for you. It's easy to do, and like I said, free and no cost.
Okay, yes, good advice, thank you. So we have a question here. Is it necessary to have an outside party help with preparation for recognition, or can a company do the work on its own?
Well, that's a really good question, because people may have gotten the impression from the fact that I was saying I'm working with companies here to pursue 50001 Ready in Wisconsin. We do that as part of the service that we provide for our companies that are part of the Strategic Energy Management Program here. So basically what I'm doing with these companies is providing some coaching, some counseling kind of a approach on best practices, things like that. But you are not required to have a third party or an outside party to walk you through this. I think one of the things that the DOE, as they, Lawrence Berkeley, when they put this together, conceived of is that it would be self-managed, that this could be something that a company could walk up to, could access the tools, could get some help maybe if they've got questions on the tools or the website from DOE and LBL, but that they could manage on their own. I think there's probably an advantage in having an outsider help you with it from a standpoint of the benefit of other experience, but certainly a company can be very successful at putting a 50001 Ready recognition program in place and filling out that attestation letter on their own, and many have.
Okay, all right, well, thank you. We have another question here. Do you see any point in the future that the U.S. Department of Energy would incentivize the 50001 process like European communities have done?
Another good question. I would say that based on my experience with the DOE and their budget cycle, that they probably don't have any budget for incenting people to do this. But incentives can come in other ways from the government too. They could provide tax breaks or things like that. I know in Europe there's a big move to get companies to adopt the 50001-2018 standard and actually become certified based on tax credits that they'll get if they go that direction. I suspect that in the U.S., just like we saw with the quality movement 20 years ago, that the incentive will come from the marketplace itself. The incentive will come from companies like GM or Walmart or Home Depot that will look to their supply base and say, it's important to us in our corporate social responsibility or our sustainability initiatives here that our supply chain be at least thinking about energy management systems and that they have some movement towards getting that in place. And so I suspect that what will happen in the U.S. is that the marketplace will drive the people to the 50001, either the standard or to recognition. As I think I pointed out earlier too, with GM and their companies all over the country that are, their plants all over the country that are being recognized. But we'll see. Anything could happen.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Another question. Do we have to use the online energy performance indicator software, or can we use something we already have in place?
That's a great question. You do not have to use the ENPI Lite tool that's on the website. Again, as with everything at the DOE and the LBL, what they're trying to do here is provide tools and support for companies that are looking for it. If you've already got a regression model that maybe you put together or somebody else put together for you, that would be just fine. One of the things I know the DOE will take a look at is to see in subsequent years of your recognition when you start showing energy performance improvements, one of the things that they'll look at is, well, how did you build the regression model based on what kind of inputs and what kind of statistical validity does your model have? So they'll want to look at R-squareds and p-values and things like that. But you can get an outside regression model recognized, I guess, or approved by the DOE for the purposes of recognition. So you can do that. It's also possible not even to use a regression model itself, although that's really the ideal approach because you want to take into consideration all the relevant variables. But even if a company simply has energy use per unit, or they have an energy intensity measure that they're using, and I know there are some companies that are European-based, operating here in Wisconsin, for instance, that have energy intensity goals as part of their corporate social responsibility. So if you have that, that can be used as well. It's just that it may not be quite as useful in the long term as a regression model. But you've got options. That's the nice thing about this whole process. You've got options.
Right, right. Thank you. Okay, another question. If we get recognized by the Department of Energy, would that mean we would have an easier time getting certified to ISO 50001 standard?
Boy, good questions all. There's a big difference between the 50001 Ready recognition and certification. A couple of differences, actually. One is the third-party review that you would get in certification is going to be held to the standard itself. The 50001 Ready recognition process reflects the standard, but for instance, like I mentioned, deciding not to change your policy to have procurement take into consideration the lifetime cost of energy as part of the decision-making process. You can do that in recognition. With the process of actually getting certification, I think you'd have to take an exception to that, and that would be something that you know, might be an impediment to getting certified. So there's a big difference between the two in terms of rigor, I would say, of being held accountable to that standard. But having said that, if you are starting from scratch, if you're starting from zero and you don't have an energy management system right now, you're still at that level 0 or level 1 that I talked about early in the presentation, going through the process of recognition will break a lot of ice and will move you much closer to being able to be conversant and cognizant about what's required for the standard. So Will it guarantee? No, nothing. I don't think anything. I don't think we can guarantee anything, but getting recognition should help you move closer to certification if you want. But be aware of the fact that there's a big leap there at the end towards being required to meet elements of the standard.
Okay, all right.
Helps.
Yes, thank you. And now you may have mentioned this, but question is, can non-US based companies also use that, the ISO 50001 Ready Navigator tool?
So the 50001 Ready Recognition Program was primarily designed for companies in the U.S. because it's the U.S. Department of Energy. But it's on that thing called the interwebs. It's available to anybody that can get out there. So maybe you don't get recognition if you're a European-based company. Maybe you don't get recognition from the U.S. Department of Energy, but you can still use the tools as ways to help yourself move forward. Right. I think the intent is that this is focused on U.S. companies because the Department of Energy's mission, or part of their mission, is to manage by fuel sources energy consumption reduction across the country. And so that's, this is a way to get data about energy consumption that meets that goal for the DOE, and energy consumption, even in other North American countries, is not a part of their mission. So I think it's available, but probably not. You're not going to get recognition if you're Mexican or Canadian or South American.
Right. Okay. All right. So any further questions? We'll wait a few more seconds to see if there's any more questions coming in. Okay, doesn't look like there are any more questions. So if there are more questions, you can contact Mark directly, either by email or phone. He has his contact information up there on the slide. So with that, it's time to end today's program. Mark, thank you again. And we'd like to also thank each and every one of you for attending today. We wish you all well and hope you stay in touch. And with that, we say goodbye for today. Thank you, and have a nice day.